And we're live.
Good evening. Good to be back after a little bit of a protracted May Day celebration. Happy to have the Privy Council up and operating this evening. And we're going to get straight into this, sort of askew with the niceties. Other than to say good evening, Ron. I'll let everybody sort of say hello, and then I'd like to dive into this Title 42 and border related issues sort of straight away. Ron, anything new from Deadwood and your burgeoning your burgeoning journalistic career in the French Dispatch or whatever that Wes Anderson movie was? It was.
I'm wagging the dog here, man.
You are? Okay.
I'm gonna try.
All right. Good for you, Max. Wonderful to have you on the heels of your journalistic coup d'etat with Lee Smith. That was awesome. If you all haven't seen that, I think I retweeted it. I'll post it again when we get off the show. But it was well handled and well said. So glad to have you back, Max. Nice to see you.
Thanks. Glad to be here with the Privy Council.
Anything new from your end? Anything you want to make us aware of before we get into this, or status quo?
I mean, it's all good. We're over at Fort Observer watching the circus in Ukraine, and looking at China, looking hard at Taiwan, and it's all about the conflict, isn't it? I mean,
well, it is. It does seem to be that way. Yeah. And well, we won't. I don't want to digress into Ukraine because I'm sort of full up on Ukraine. Okay. I don't know what to call you this evening. Rift Valley, Hong Kong, whatever.
Oh, you guys!
You still look like a drag queen reader at the New York Public Library, but I don't know what that's all about. So.
Very, very, very heavy on the pearls, though.
I did, yeah.
Yeah, it's all good. I just, echoing Max and Ron, it's, the circus is continuing, and you've got to stay engaged with it constantly because things that you're not trained to see are happening on a daily basis because it's just gone off the edge of predictive risk, right? So we're dealing with all the stuff that everybody used to laugh about. And, everybody would say, oh, this once in 1,000 years, once in 100 years, this is gone. This is no possible, permutation of data that would lead you to some of these things. So be prepared for anything.
I struggle with this because I can't make the determination if this is some really genius plan or it's just massive incompetence. It's got to be one or the other. So we'll look for insights as to what the tell is on that as we get into this discussion as it relates to the invasion of the second wave of the invasion on our border. Watcher, what's up with you? How are things in Entrepreneurville?
Very well. I learned very recently from a friend that apparently game stores are somewhat financial recession resistant.
Well, nice.
On a very similar theory to the lipstick index. If you understand that.
I do understand that. It's little luxuries that make you feel good, even if the rest of the world sucks. That's the definition of the lipstick index.
So. Exactly. So
I thought maybe you were saying that Watcher was going trans or something like that. God.
No, but on that premise, the future looks bright, eh?
There you go. I'll be wearing shades next time.
So I did want to point out one thing is that I did see that Biden somebody in the administration has tweeted out that they're efforting a phone call with Xi Jinping in the not too distant future. I guess that's the quarterly report back to headquarters. Is that right?
Yeah? According to Sam Fannis, it is.
Yeah, Sam went to town this week, which it's really good to see somebody like that coming out with a baseball bat and reminding people that we're paying attention.
Well, and I got this press conference this morning with James Comer and the Oversight Committee, and sort of the tip of the iceberg of the Biden family crime syndicate. It was Barzini all along. I don't watch the evening news on CBS or NBC or ABC, so I don't know if it was covered at all. I doubt it. But I don't know how they're going to keep a lid on this if they continue to exercise subpoena power.
They're going
But
to
I
refuse to comply.
Well,
Well.
the FBI already refused to comply with the subpoena for the whistleblower document, the one that was talked
Right.
about the
No,
last
that's right.
couple of weeks.
That's right.
You know,
So
the director of the FBI said, "Oh, sources and methods," and Max and I know that is absolute bullshit. You know, let's hide behind sources and methods every single time.
well, how
Yeah,
can it be
9 times out
sources?
of 10. Yeah.
How can it be sources and methods if it's stuff that the whistleblower brought to him?
Well,
It's not like they
because
discovered
there's
this
ongoing
stuff.
investigations, Stan, and we could compromise that important source in the middle of something or other that it's all bullshit. I mean, the director of the FBI is absolutely pathetic, and why the House and the Senate continue to entertain his BS, especially after he dissed the senators in that one thing. Oh, I gotta go, and he went on vacation, and he cut short his testimony. It's like, I mean, if you or I did that, we'd be in contempt of Congress.
You'd be in jail.
So
You'd be in the
Well,
Bastille.
The problem we have, Stan, is I know you've talked about this a dozen times, is people want to disconnect the responsibility of Congress to use the weapon of the purse against the bureaucracies that they finance and have oversight on. We've really lost sight of that. At some point, they're going to have to be prepared to say to these large entities that are considered critical, sorry, guys, all the money is going to stop. And yes,
Well, we've sort of broadly and unselectively said that with
but
the
somebody,
debt ceiling bill. So
but
yeah,
now, it's time for somebody to bring out an accurate weapon of leadership and go out and say, okay, these arms of these departments have zero funding. Go home, pack your bags, hand your files to the people we've sent to take your files. So the things that are critical functions. So, gee, Marshal Service may be in the same box with you guys, but guess what? We've just put them in charge because they have a different structure that is more responsive to civilian leadership. This is the game that has to be played, and I think it's considered volatile and inflammatory by the bureaucratic class. But this is how you break an impasse that we're in.
mm-hmm.
And if you can't do it, then it becomes a catastrophic failure of the system.
If you read social media on this stuff, you mentioned the press conference earlier today about the Biden crime syndicate family.
Right.
A lot of people tweeting go, yeah. Wake me up when the prosecutor is, the trial starts, or when, indictments are coming down. But until then, stop, performing. It's all performative. There's no meat behind it. It's great stuff, but
you got to give Comer a little bit of time. I don't want him to turn into John Durham, but I mean, I think that yeah, exactly. You got to give him a little bit of time. I think they've held some of this stuff until Biden announced he was going to run again.
Well,
and so we'll see what happens. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt until they don't do something. But I think that McCarthy has to be on a mission to take his 5-member majority and drive it as far as it'll go. Because
he needs to.
Because what if he pisses people off? If they don't maintain it, we're screwed anyhow. So
they're going to try to peel it away. Santos is a good example.
Yeah.
From the beginning of an understanding of some of the lies that the man told, took 90 to 120 days to get prosecution underway, and you put that up against what we have. What you have on Hunter Biden. It's been years, right? And there were warnings before. About that. So I mean, we've got to self-regulate this. I mean, there's a chat from Neon Arrakis. He asked a point about normalcy bias. He said,
"I was just going to get to that, but I can't."
I know. I think he's spot on with that. It's we talk about it all the time, and I go, geez, why aren't people getting involved? Thank you, Ron.
I'll tell you why. 3.4% unemployment. That's why.
They're busy.
You believe that?
I do. Well, I don't believe the number because I think the participation rate is cooked. But the gist of it is that on the back end of the pandemic, people are really working hard to claw their life back. And a lot of folks, I talk to people, I ask this question of people, that are in my circle and elsewhere. And it's, dude, I'm really happy. I locked in my mortgage for 30 years at 3%. And now all these poor suckers are looking at 6.5. And I've got my HELOC in place, and the wife wants to redo the kitchen. And I just got a 6% raise when I changed jobs. The fact that that's not really above the rate of inflation doesn't factor into it. But we're going to do the kitchen this summer. And the kids are doing okay in school. And yeah, the school board's a pain in the ass, and we have some things we have to do. So it hasn't permeated yet to a lot of people who are just, consumers of the fruits of what the country has provided as benefit, but aren't in the process yet of sort of paying back for the benefits that they've
Yeah.
garnered by being a citizen.
Yeah.
And let me just say this, and to answer Neon Araxis, and I'll shut up, and you guys can take it on from your view. I've said this for almost a year now, and that it's going to take the next 18 months of chicanery and circuses and odd sort of things. And Title 42 is the kickoff on this. Okay, pay no attention to the hordes coming across the border. The border is secure. And the events around this election, like Trump being on CNN and all this other sort of stuff, are going to rip away the normalcy bias of a large portion of the country who are thinking just like the people I described. And when we get to Q1 2025, and there's been another fortified election, I don't think Biden's going to be the candidate. I think you guys know that.
Right.
But there's been another fortified election that is inexplicable. That I think is what is going to take to rip away the normalcy bias from enough people to matter. And I think it's going to be a step by step, like dermal peel. If your wife has ever had a dermal peel, which is excruciating, but it's a dermal peel that is going to happen to people with all the silly events that are going to go on between now and inauguration in 2025. So
You mean installment, not an inauguration, but
yeah, well, whatever.
so yesterday
Coronation.
I
Coronation. How about that?
attended the annual meeting of the Deadwood Chamber of Commerce. And Deadwood's economy lives on tourism and gaming, the casinos, the gambling. And we had people there talking about, oh, it's going to be a great year, blah blah blah. Last year was great, blah blah. I mean, they are so in this mode of like, yeah, people be able to afford the gas to drive here, and we and people have lots of money to lose at the casinos, and yeah, it's and pay the exorbitant amount at the hotels and the food at the restaurants, and I'm just sitting there going, wow. I mean, I hope you're all right, but gosh, this from everything else I'm seeing, I mean, the first quarter 2025, I keep hoping it happens sooner, because I don't want the revolution of 1905 to, and then I have to wait all the way to 1917. I can't wait that long. I ain't that young, dude.
I understand. Max, any views on normalcy bias from your perspective in terms of what's keeping the souffle from deflating?
Oh, I think everyone's just waiting for the hero to show up and save them. I mean, that's what they see in the movies. That's
There's a bit of that, right?
What's that?
He's pointing at you.
Okay.
You've
Yeah.
been
Well,
nominated
I'm
as
like,
the hero.
I'm looking over here going, wait, is somebody sneaking up behind me, Ron? But no, no, I think they're waiting for some hero to show up, and some big politician, some, famous actor, some like bigwig, anybody but themselves. And that's the problem right now, is everyone's looking at each other going, okay, who's going to fix this? Well, You know,
Well, no,
you're
it's
going to
like
fix it, or it's not going to get fixed.
no. See, we're still in that methodology that says, "Well, I voted." I mean, come
Yeah,
on, right?
it's the
Yeah, yeah.
long, yeah, it's the long, boring glide slope of your life,
It's
right?
boiling
And
the
so
frog 1 degree at a time. That's what we're doing.
I talk to so many people who are on that long, slow glide path, and it's just like, any interest in doing anything new? No, that would require maneuvering. I have no interest in maneuvering at this
Well,
point.
Bob Johnson makes a comment in the chat that I think is appropriate to sort of highlight, and that is this continued strong retail activity in the economy has shifted from spending stimulus money to now taking on higher credit card balances. And there's an aspect of that the Fed likes to talk about. Rising interest rates have a long and variable lag, but they eventually show up in the economy, and I'm afraid that that's likely to happen in this instance. So
Yep.
Yeah.
it's
And there were a lot of numbers this week about repeat bankruptcies and duplicate bankruptcies occurring in entities that had just kind of come back in the last 2 to 5 years. And I think the stats were over $30 million bankruptcies, and the numbers were way
so Neon Arrakis, I think your point's well taken. I think it's something that we've talked about before. I think the pace of the dermal peel is accelerating, and there's not going to be any place to hide from it, I don't think, over the next 18 to 20 months. And we'll see what we get to when we get to Chinese New Year in 2025.
Oh, jeez.
So can we pull up the other super chat, Watcher? I think there's one for 20 out there, or did we do it already? I've lost count.
Oh, there's one about the Imperial Valley of California.
Okay, very good. Yes. So born and raised in Imperial Valley, California. Remember human waves of illegal immigrants crossing the border in the 90s? They tore down the fence to help build an NAFTA trucking across it's burglarized. And this is going to happen with increased occurrence as, and we were talking about this in the green room. Is it 700, 750, a million in this first wave? And I'm going to look for the military guys to put that number in perspective. That's more troops than invaded Ukraine. That's more people than invaded Ukraine, right? By a
But they're
factor of 2.
peaceful.
Yeah.
But these are peaceful. They're economic refugees. They're fleeing oppression, and they're looking for opportunity. And give us, you're tired, you're hungry, you're poor. Come on, let's all hug.
Well, I think the count is now up to 106 different countries represented in this flow of humanity.
You mean there's no Swiss? Dang it.
No Swiss. And so it's false on its face. But Lance Corporal Veteran, I feel for you. And I know a number of folks in the Imperial Valley, and particularly guys who are involved in agriculture, and it's tough. It's tough.
Yeah, and most of the guys out there too are automating, right? So you've got
they
the grass and alfalfa and feed crop stuff, and that's all highly automated. They need less labor. All the vegetable crops out there, they're automating them too. A lot of robotics coming in, but they got a water problem as well. And so we haven't even started talking about the impact of the water problem across the border. That's a constant state of a problem.
Well, and let's talk about Sierra Vista, Arizona, and right next door to Fort Huachuca, which I don't know. There's something going on there. Oh, it's the Army Intelligence School and things like that. But Sierra Vista, the residents of Sierra Vista, a beautiful town, and has grown quite a lot. The residents basically lock their doors at night, and neighborhood watches and things like that, because of the roving gangs of illegals that are just pouring across the border. And Fort Huachuca is like, I can't do anything. They barely protect the hardcore of the base.
Well, and that gets me to a point that I want to raise, and I'd like people's opinion, and I'd like if people in the chat, particularly if you're in Texas, I'd like your thoughts on this, and that is, I'm very disappointed in Governor Greg Abbott of Texas. There's been multiple occasions, and we're setting up for another one, where I think he's had the ability to declare an invasion, and there's a Texas statute under which he can do that, and then marshal all sorts of additional sort of resources to bring to bear on trying to stop this wave of migration. and he still hasn't done it. Now he's talking about doing it again. And what I'm upset about is that he's managed a couple of sort of photo op things where he's done stuff to get attention, but there's not been. I mean, if I were a Texan and he was my governor, I would expect him to be George fucking Patton by now. Okay, and letters of marque, volunteers, whatever it takes. And because now Biden has managed the psychological operation around doing things that line up for campaign commercials in the future. So sending down 1,500 troops basically to take table reservations and direct people to buses to different places is just a fake operation to begin with. But I don't understand why Texas, of all places, and people will explain to me that Texas is blue in Austin, blue in San Antonio, blue in Houston. I get that. I understand that. But I don't think that this is a winning strategy for Abbott and for the state of Texas to continue to do what they're doing. And that is, I think they've got to raise the flag and get after this. Otherwise, you're just part of the problem. You're not part of the solution. Thoughts?
I think Abbott's, walking the center line. Texas is really not as red as it used to be. You go through Dallas, Fort Worth, San Antonio, Austin. I mean, my God, Austin. I mean, it's Subaru blue hair city, and there is a lot of Democrats in the big cities throughout Texas, and I think Abbott is looking to the left, to the Democrats, and he's looking to the right, and he's trying to walk the line in between the two and not piss either side off too badly while not really addressing either side's real concerns. And that's the politics of, that's like pre 9/11 politics, to be honest with you. I know that was like 20 something years ago, but that's what Abbott's doing. He's not really leading. He's just doing the minimum to stay in office and not piss off too many people and get primaried.
Max makes a good point.
Abbott isn't walking anything. You know that, right?
Yeah, I know. I'm just
okay. I'm busting on you, brother.
You guys are making really good points about Texas. Texas has always had this libertarian feint. It doesn't like strong government, but it's got an interesting strong government approach when you get on the wrong side of them. So Austin, the old Austin, the kind of central government Austin, had a strong arm in things that concerned them. Railways, highways, things they controlled and owned, oil, and that's Bush world conservative, right? And then you had this period of Californication of Texas, where everybody said, "Oh, we're going to go to Austin and build semiconductors," and then, "Oh, we're going to go to Austin because they make semiconductors," and then, "Oh, we're going to go to Austin because they do beautiful films and great music." And so you had this cultural migration of people who were center left into Texas. And so you do have a bifurcated state, or even, it's even more complex than that, because you have the urban centers as described, and the rural folk are standing back. The true Texas people are standing back going, "What the hell is going on here?" Yeah. And you can't get a decent chicken fried steak anywhere anymore. So they've lost sight, of the core fundamentals of the republic. But
West Texas doesn't recognize the rest of the state anymore. I mean, as far
absolutely.
as who are these people?
West Texas has changed too because of the inflow of oil and gas labor. So statistically, the counties that used to be small and poorly populated have just exploded. I mean, San Antonio used to be a fairly small city. Bexar County, it's huge now. It's a top 10, top 6.
It used to be a very military-centric city too.
Yeah.
Well,
I remember in '76 it was a small sized city.
Yeah.
And now
I think Clay Martin's favorite insurance company is headquartered in San Antonio.
Stop. Don't go there.
So what's changed a lot in Texas is just they've demilitarized some of the big communities. But they put an immense number of federal workers in, right? So San Antonio is like an offsite of choice. So they've got pretty much every data forming organization, any military service organization, San Antonio or Bexar County. So you've had a really interesting shift though in the demographics. It's very suburban now, and the cities have gone hardcore, very what I would describe as liberal left. So Houston being the African American community has twisted Houston to that way. You've got San Antonio, which has always been LULAC, League of United Latin American Citizens. So very much leftist, Hispanic political center. And you've got Dallas, which, is dancing right at the edge, and Fort Worth every now and then nudges them back. But it's a tough state to predict. And it's an expensive state to run in. So that's another option.
Ted Cruz almost lost the last time. Because of the influx of Californication and other assorted blue hairs. But just remember, Dallas is where the East ends, and Fort Worth is where the West actually begins. Just saying.
Fair point.
That's important. And it's an important state for us as a country. The amount of critical production that comes out of the state of Texas.
But it's not going to be a solid red state much longer. I predict by 2028, it's going to be a purple, maybe, shading pink.
Well, we've seen that in Virginia as well.
No. Yeah, we've lived it. So it's going to be an interesting thing to see what the people in Texas do. And what's interesting to me is the people who've moved there for the libertarian values, for that non-leftist world. I hope they haven't forgot why they went. And I feel the same way about Florida. Why do you even go to Texas? Think about it. And, you might like it now, but don't destroy it the way you did California, Oregon, and Washington.
Right. We have the same problem here in South Dakota. And I tell the recent arrivals, I'm all like, hey, where are you from? And they tell me Colorado, California, wherever, Oregon, Washington.
And you cringe.
Well, no, but they I meet them at Republican Party functions, and I says, and I look at them and I'm serious, but I do it with a smile. I says, hey, remember, you guys came here as refugees. You're not here as missionaries to convert us to what you left. And they kind of look at me, go, huh? But I said, don't bring your, one guy says, yeah, we need to bring more light rail here to South Dakota. I looked at him and says, you can beam your ass right back to San Francisco and you can ride the BART all day long, dude. Get the F out of here.
There's not enough population in the whole state to justify.
I know that.
Where are they going to?
But this guy, I followed him out into the parking lot. I'm going, hey, that's a nice Tesla.
Into the parking lot.
Well, but he's driving a Tesla. I didn't follow him on purpose. I wasn't going to beat him up or anything. But he's driving a fucking Tesla. I'm going like, dude, really? You're in freaking South Dakota, dude. Get an effing pickup truck or a Jeep.
I'll tell you what he'll do is he'll go trade his Tesla in for one of those Rivian pickup trucks, and then not understand why you don't get it. Now walk me through it one more time.
Oh God!
Anyways, the Rivian vehicles are ugly. I'm telling you, they are. Yeah. They look like frogs.
French people?
It's a Peugeot truck.
It's a Peugeot truck, Citroën truck.
Citroën truck.
No, I agree. Those Rivians are almost like they looked at Nissan's Juke and said, "Hold my beer."
Yeah, exactly.
All right, let me come back. Let me come back to
Title 42.
Title. Well, let's just broaden this and say it's an immigration issue. So I'm going to make you, Ron. I'm going to make you the sovereign of Texas. What would you be doing at this particular point, given a free hand?
Oh, seriously?
Seriously. I think it's important for people to know these things.
I would, oh God.
Can't call the 160th in.
No, don't, stop it. I would activate the entire National Guard. I would call other state governors that are red governors,
right?
Republican states, and say, every state's a border state. I need help. And if, because this problem will envelop the rest. It will be like, like a paper towel commercial where everything just gets absorbed up, and you guys will, maybe not this week or this month, but you will get. And I would tell the federal people, the Customs and Border Patrol people and the under 1,000 U.S. active duty military people there to, like be the tour guides, holding up signs like, "Hey, the bus leaving for New York City is right here." Um, uh, I tell 'em, "Look, you guys can stand aside, or you can, enforce the law of, of Texas. And if you don't, I'll pad your ass over to the local Motel 6, and you can just sit there and cry to Washington D.C." And I tell Washington to pound sand. I'm not going to put up with it anymore. My border communities, and the border communities aren't just right there on the border. I'm not, we're not talking
The,
Brownsville and Laughlin.
the
I mean,
border
we're talking
communities here in
200
Oklahoma now.
miles, 200 miles
Yeah.
away from the border, at least. I'd sit there and say no, and I'd close the border. I mean, we saw the one video of concertina wire being deployed. Concertina wire is cheap, and and I'd sit there and like, warning shots are authorized. I'm sorry. I mean, and then I'd take the guys that aren't on border patrol duty. I'd go to all these NGO shelters and all these Catholic relief agency and what all, and just basically saying, "Hey, the bus is out here. You're all being fucking deported now."
Yeah.
I'd go totally Conan the Barbarian.
Well, I think it's going to take some measure of that. I think to turn this or to get the message out to all these people who think they're just going to tippy-toe across the border and be welcomed with open arms. I think there's a messaging issue there that says, sorry, those days are behind us. And the federal government's not going to do it at this juncture. And so I think, the eyes of Texas need to turn to Governor Abbott and we should talk about Arizona as well, but with Katie Hobbs as the governor in Arizona, it's capitulation. It's
And New Mexico capitulation.
it's capitulation. And I want to stop for a minute, and I really want to say my thoughts, and I want your thoughts. That capitulation means the end of the country, in my view, as we know it, as it was founded, as it was conceived, as it's been defended for over 200 years. I just, the rule of law, property rights, all the things that I think are sort of central to American success over the last 200 and some odd years are under attack by the very people who are coming here supposedly because of that. And they'll never find it again once it's gone. That's my view, at least in those areas that continue to be subservient to the federal government. That would take us down a different path, which I'm not going to do tonight. But I'm just I'm convinced that there's little chance for recovery if this were to continue for another 2 years, because you'd be at 15 million people in addition to the 11 that are already here.
You're being very generous in your numbers.
Well, I'm just trying to be.
I mean, you're being very conservative. I mean, I think
don't.
it's a lot more than that.
I won't argue with you about that. But.
Please don't.
So thoughts before I go clean up the other two super chats that we need to clean up soon. But I'm with you, Ron. I think I would be very draconian in my approach because I don't think there's any choice if we're going to preserve a constitutional republic.
If we half-ass it, I mean, it's we're never going to solve anything. And I don't care. I mean, remember when Trump got elected before he got inaugurated? All these people were sitting there screaming and clutching pearls about, the mass deportations and things like that. Damn it, we should have done it then. And it's just terrible. I mean, even here in South Dakota, people are getting worried about this stuff, and they're holding our sole congressman, a Republican, accountable because he voted against all of Trump's border security initiatives, the wall, and deploying additional personnel to enforce the existing laws. And he's like, well, you got to understand, like, No, dude, we don't understand. But yeah, but yeah, if we don't do a full immigration moratorium, both legal and illegal, obviously illegal, and we deport every single one. I don't care if you came here as a 2-month infant, you're out. You're gone. Not my problem. You know, go back to your home country. Oh, I don't speak the language. I don't know anything about it. And we're not just talking Mexico. I'm talking the world. You know, great. And if the country that you came from or doesn't accept you, okay, that's fine. We'll put these people in detention camps. We'll put them in AOC, cages, whatever. And oh, by the way, your foreign aid, it's cut off 100%. Because you know what? I'm not funding you if you can't control your people and you don't want to accept responsibility for your people. Well, tough shit. I mean, you know, we've got to go totally hardcore on this stuff. Otherwise, as you say, Stan, we're no longer a country, and hey, welcome. We're the third world. I mean, Sam Faddis says, he wrote an article today in his And magazine, that Calcutta has come to the United States. I mean, massive poverty, crime. I mean, eh, just it's terrible. I mean, Border Patrol people are saying that one of the first things the female refugees, immigrants, illegal aliens, whatever the hell you want to call them, when
Criminals.
the criminals, they want to get pregnancy tests because they've been repeatedly raped en route from wherever they started to wherever they're at in the U.S. It's like this is bullshit, you know, and we can no longer afford this. I mean, we can't afford a sudden population growth in the United States of multiple millions of people without any skills, language ability, education ability, and suddenly, and we're expected, the 48 contiguous states here are expected to absorb them. And what do these people do? I mean, you can only build so many houses, you can only roof so many roofs, you can only do so much drywall, you can only pick so many crops. Like whatever. I mean, this is just. I'm sorry. You got me started. Damn it.
No,
No,
that's
that's a good
that's
run
fine.
rant.
I think that's a good rant, and I think much. So okay, this sort of segues into this, and that is, Neonarakis wants our opinion on, let's suspend U.S.'s best and richest. Which country rises to the top? I'm assuming this is from an immigration perspective, attractiveness as an immigration target. That's a hard one. Well, I think it was Sweden. Sweden beat us to that, and they took in all those Syrian refugees, and now they've got a low-grade insurgency going on in Sweden, where there's
And
no-go zones
and Somalis.
and Somalis.
People will go anywhere they can if they've already left where they're from.
Instead of fixing where they're from.
Well, they don't feel like they can fix where they're from, and we've done nothing to make change happen in these foreign countries that is stable. We're just not.
It's
We're
not
not
my
able to do it.
responsibility to
It's
fix
not
their
our
country.
I agree with you. But we're at a point where the left is holding the Western powers responsible for the instability left in the Middle East, Africa, and Asia. And so you've got enough of the population that's created this urgency and guilt complex that allows these migrants to flow. And you got guys like Soros financing the opposition media. And this whole thing started around Title 42. And the thing that always blew me away about Title 42 is you could come every day to the border checkpoint and apply for asylum and be turned down, and there was no record of the fact that you lied. It was
Right.
it was a you're at liberty to keep trying, but we're going to turn you away because of a pandemic. And so it was, back to our discussions of the endless glide slope with no maneuvering. It gave our government the ability to create a long glide slope with no maneuvering. They didn't have to do anything. Oh, Title 42 you weren't doing. You had no choice. I had no choice. I had to turn them away. I won't hold it against them. and I don't dislike them for whatever nonsense they made up or their false papers or any of that. Come back tomorrow and try again, or go 60 miles south or north and try at that port of entry, because there'll be zero record of you, including photographic. We have to get with the game of having security at the border. And I just think that Title 42 allowed the government to drag ass through this whole period of massive migration. And now this is normal. People are immune to being shown 100,000 people backed up in Piedras Negras. They don't care. It's like, oh, that's in Piedras Negras. What they forget is there's an American city just across the border, right? These are not small cities. El Paso, Laredo, Brownsville, these are consequential cities, and Americans don't have any geographical economic sense. So it's terribly sad to see this happen. Terribly sad. And countries internationally, the funniest thing I've seen in the way of immigrant flow has been places like Portugal, who've just said, hey, enough, stop already. We got too many people from LA buying passports here. It's like housing got too expensive. The restaurants were full of annoying people who complained about everything. And the Portuguese said, hey, wait a minute. Okay, we understand you guys are rich enough to move here, but we don't like so many of you being here. Mexico, same thing. Enough of these Americans coming down and driving up housing prices in the states that are out.
Mexico City was bitching about the gentrification of Mexico City, right?
Gringolandia del Sur, it's like, hey, let's go down to Mexico. Food's cheap. Everybody's in the restaurants, and we complain, and we have no sense of being in someone else's country, and it drives them bats. So that's my observation on which country. We're going to go through them really quickly, and it's been sad to see, because we used to be quite welcome in Mexico City and quite welcome in Lisbon, and it appears we're not anymore.
I think to answer Neonarakis's question, I think the shift is going to be back to some of the countries in Europe that haven't been overwhelmed by immigration already. France already realizes they've let too many people in, and they've got a real problem, a budding insurgency, Islamic insurgency in their country, and they're losing control of it. The UK is already gone. The UK is not salvageable, and so a lot of the Western European nations and the Scandinavian folks in the north are all like, hey, enough is enough. But there's still Eastern Europe, and there's still places like Switzerland and Austria that haven't really topped out yet, and I think that'll be the target for immigrants in the future. That's not to say that Latin American refugees or immigrants are going to try and cross the Atlantic to get to Europe, but the U.S. will be less appealing globally as it becomes inundated like the rest of the countries in Western Europe are. But jumping back over to what Ron was talking about, I would just say, when he was talking about what we need to do, I would encapsulate Ron's ideas into two lanes. Number one, governors have to get together and they have to create a constitutional crisis with Washington. They need to throw the federal officials out of their states, threaten them with arrest, and make a constitutional crisis. Now, I'm not saying throw the CBP guys out, because the CBP guys and gals working on the border are sympathetic to the individual states. They know,
but the DHS bureaucracy.
The DHS bureaucracy. Toss those people out. Tell them, hey, you're not welcome here. Create a constitutional crisis and force this thing to the Supreme Court for some type of ruling that would probably fall in line with the states, because after all, the federal government in Washington is not doing their job on border security. Nobody thinks they are. Even the people on the left are like shrugging.
What do you think about the notion that states, particularly real border states, and this comes back to Texas to a degree, because I don't think Arizona's got the ability to do it, nor New Mexico, but let's say Texas said, you know what, we're not remitting anything to the federal government anymore. Oil and gas taxes, revenue of any sort. We're not doing that because you've breached your primary responsibility to the states, and that is national security.
Yeah.
You've defaulted on your obligation to secure the borders, even though it's one of the top constitutional responsibilities and obligations of the federal government. You've breached it, and so all bets are off at this particular point. Again, to get to that constitutional crisis, Max, that you're talking about,
Yeah.
in terms of codifying it from a legal perspective that says, federal government, you're in breach, and so consequently,
Absolutely.
we're not beholden to you as it relates to the 150 other things that you expect us to do for you. And by the way, pack your boys up and get them to help and send them to Connecticut, right? Or someplace else for that matter.
Yeah, you need to pile on. I agree.
It's gonna
Governor
be
Abbott will
ugly.
need much larger wheelchair to hold those balls.
Yeah. Oh, and the second thing I wanted to say was, hey, there are NGOs working the bolt on this immigration thing. There are American NGOs that are down there in Central America that are facilitating this wave of migration to
Catholic
the southern
Charities is
border.
top amongst them.
We need to go after those NGOs, just like DOJ going after Assange.
Rico.
That kind of go after them. I mean,
I
lock
agree
them
with
up
that.
and put them in jail.
Well,
I
you see,
agree with
the eye opener on that, Max, is that we're actually funding them.
Yeah, I know.
So federal money, HHS, so on and so forth, are funding the NGOs to handle the migrants. And so it's become a liberal cash recycling machine into the liberal NGOs. And Catholic Charities has fallen in because it's their mission. Many of these people are Catholic. And so they've fallen into this very leftist kind of Central America circa 85 mindset of, we're going to be on the side of the campesinos here. What they don't understand in Washington is we're not getting campesinos, we're getting everybody. It's an open spigot, man. If you're Venezuelan, Cuban, Haitian, you come in, raise your hand. It's a shoe-in. And if you come in and identify as something unique, I'm not a normal person because of X, Y, and Z. Holy moly, you go to the front of the line. They'll get you a hotel room and they'll, 3 squares a day. And where do you want to
And a
go?
cell phone.
And we'll line you up with the congressional district of our choice. Here, give us a second, and we'll fast track you. That's how this appears to be going.
I think what Ron is saying, and it sounds like Max agrees with him, I know I do, is that we need the president of Honduras to teach some lessons as to how to because the cartels are driving this as well, right? But what's going on in Honduras is remarkable in terms of the turnaround. Is it El Salvador or Honduras?
Yeah, where the MS-13 guys are all.
Yeah, it's Honduras, isn't it?
No,
I thought it was El Salvador, but
El Salvador.
It is El Salvador. My apologies. What? Sorry, I made a mistake.
No, they just they basically took all the gangbangers out of circulation.
They built a prison for 40,000 people and filled it in a month.
Yeah, if you have the wrong kind of tattoos, you self-identify as somebody we should put in the box, and they put them in the box. And the crime rate, murder rate, everything which was out of control in El Salvador is down. Now, the personal liberties people are screaming like mad. The same nonprofits that are on our border being funded by the same people are screaming at the president of El Salvador. So it's a really interesting, dynamic that they create crisis, and then if you finance it, they'll pursue it. But if you step in and make change, you get off the glide slope, they'll come after you on that. So
that's life. I mean, life's always that way. I mean, that's not a reason not to act. And this goes back to my disappointment with Greg Abbott. Okay, somebody's going to challenge him for election. Get off the Karl Rove playbook and do something, and act in that regard. I mean, you're not there to be a career politician. You're there to be the leader of a state, whether it's Texas or some other place. So I really, and maybe I'm a dinosaur, and I'm beginning to think about that more and more these days. And that is, I'm just a leftover. I've got sort of
Stanceratops.
I've got remnant sort of Neanderthal genetics going on at this particular point, because I look at this and I can't for the life of me understand why more people aren't up in arms about this.
Because it hasn't impacted them yet personally.
Yeah, but
When
I don't see. So let's talk about things that have impacted them, which are only going to get worse in the aftermath of this thing. Okay, crime in these cities, in big blue cities. Okay, go down the list: New York, Chicago, San Francisco, L.A.,
Yeah.
Detroit, Newark, Philadelphia. Okay, Baltimore is going to go even further off the
Oh, yeah.
rails at this
But
particular.
even in Texas, it doesn't impact me until, um, I get carjacked. I can't pull into a gas station without, 100, single military aged males hanging around, pretending they're looking for a job or waiting for the builder to show up and like, hey, I need 20 guys to, do roofing today or whatever. And the women get raped, and your daughter dies of a fentanyl overdose, and your son gets killed by a drunk driver, or gets involved in a gang war, crossfire or something like that. That's when it's going to impact people. And I'm surprised that the people on the border of Texas and the other 3 states, California, Arizona, New Mexico, haven't banded together and saying like, yeah, I'm tired of these people trespassing on my property, you know, you know, killing my cattle, barging into my outbuildings, whatever. I'm going to start taking the matters into my own hand. Property rights are sacrosanct. It's gonna. We talked earlier in the green room about the cops, doing a lot of off-duty work in Texas because of Texas, laws and stipulations, and they're going to get tired and they're going to start making mistakes, and I'm in fear for my life. Bang bang, you're dead. You know, and George Floyd is going to like be a like it's going to be terrible because either people are going to react violently to protect themselves and their property and their loved ones, or they're not. And you know what? Fuck them. They're gonna get what they deserve, because if you're
See,
not gonna stand up for yourself, then I'm sorry.
but here again, this normalcy bias comes into play,
You're
and that
right.
is,
No, I get it. I see it all the time.
if I'm a police officer, and Jim, you can speak to this. If I'm a police officer and I watch what's gone on since 2020 with the demonization of the police and the defunding of the police, and basically creating this image of the police as the Gestapo. Take for example this kid on the subway train in the Jordan Neely incident in New York. Okay, they're ready to hang that guy, and all he did. And I'm not going to argue the fine points of whether he did too much or did too little, but he decided he was going to act. Go to your point, Ron. So, and even if I act to defend my own property, I can give you the example of the two lawyers in that gated community in St. Louis who pulled the pistols, and then Kim Gardner, now the former DA in St. Louis, went after him. They were
Hmm.
standing on their property,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah. Oh,
so,
yeah.
so the left has preempted the notion that you can act in defense of your own property rights or your own liberty, because you might be stepping on somebody whose great ancestors were, you know, uh, brought to this country in less than ideal conditions. Has got nothing to do with them at this particular point. But this mass guilt psychosis is held out there as a way to sort of punish people who are inclined to act as you've indicated, and that is in defense of their constitutional rights, in defense of their
Well,
property, their liberty, and people have laid down and taken it at this particular point.
well, I now carry every day, every time I leave the house, and yeah, I've had police officers come up and kind of pat me, because it's hidden, but not very well, because
That's because
I
it's
didn't pay
big.
attention
That's
that day
because
in
it's
class,
big, Ron.
Max. But and they
It's
go,
a
"Are
big
are you
gun.
are you carrying?" And I go, "Yeah, I am." We have constitutional carry in this state, and
Mhm.
yeah, I'm going to protect myself. I mean, where our church is in our town, across the street is a house, a residence with a big trans flag, and um, the preacher and I, the pastor and I, got into a discussion, and he's all like, "Oh, turn the other cheek." I says, Pastor, after 4 cheeks, I'm done. I mean, I've only got 4 cheeks. I'm not turning any more cheeks. And, I'm not going to be I'm not going to roll over and tickle me Elmo Christian. I'm going to fight back. I'm going to defend my faith. I'm going to defend my person. I'm going to defend my loved ones. And I'm going to defend this church. And I really don't want to have happen here what happened in Nashville. And, if you don't start during your sermons talking about Christians need to fight for what's right and stand up for what's right instead of just like, well, let's just turn the other cheek. Let's be nice about it, and you know, they're going to constantly push the envelope, and before you know it, you know, you and I are going to share a boxcar together to some camp. And he just looked at me like, you don't think it's going to get that bad? I says, I certainly hope not, but you got to start standing up for yourself.
That's right. I just did it.
And most of the
I
people
just
that
did
were
it professionally for 35 years. But no, I
Yeah.
don't think it's going to get that bad.
Well,
No,
but I certainly hope not. But I mean, and the other gentlemen that were listening to this discussion, they were like, and everybody just kind of looked at me like I had a third eye grown out of my forehead. And but after we all broke up, and everybody, people can, oh, I really agree with you. I says, yeah, but you didn't fucking say anything, dude.
that's okay. Back to the normalcy bias, and I'm sure Max has
Exactly,
something on this.
exactly.
Sometimes in the day to day of what we do, you forget that people's day to day doesn't involve the things that we talk about at work. It's a curious thing when people will sit me down at a dinner party and they go, "How was your week?" And you go, it was kind of interesting." And they go, "Well, what did you do?" And I said, "Well, we talked about this and we talked about that." And they blanch. They go white. And they're they're like, "Well, did you do anything positive?" And I said, "Well, everything I did was positive, but a lot of it's kind of dark art stuff. And you're talking about things that people don't want to deal with, right?"
Yeah.
And people complain when their power goes off, but they don't want to talk about why and how and who. And they're like, "Oh, well, it's gotten better." Well, no, not necessarily, but you don't have to even dive into the deep end with them. And this issue of being polite, and I have a bias towards being polite in public discourse. I suspended that rule about 6 months ago. When I'm in a room and people come up with obscure craziness, instead of just backing away and smiling and nodding, I actually look them in the eye and say, "God, I completely disagree with you." You know, my belief structure is almost antithetical to yours, and wow, that's amazing, isn't it? And you just smile, and it's non-confrontational, but you have to let people know you disagree with them, and
Yeah.
it's perfectly legitimate conversation, and it isn't rude. It's been turned into being rude because people are afraid of being accused of being bigots and racists and this and that. It's your belief structure. It's worked
Hmm.
for us for a long time. Have the conversation. And again, don't be afraid of telling people what you believe. I think we've gone so far into this pablum of society that we've not let people know that we disagree with them. And I'll tell
I've
you
never
what,
had that problem.
yeah, yes, but that's genetic predisposition, buddy.
It is that.
That's the Caucasus and the Pyrenees and that underground tunnel.
Oh my
It's
God.
it's my 4'11" paternal grandmother. That's she was hell on wheels, man.
I
So
saw
I,
her
you
in
know,
the Outlaw Jesse Wales movie. Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, this is the only thing I'd ask of the people who listen to us and is just stand up for your opinion a little bit more aggressively in public. And when you see somebody being cornered by crazy, you don't have to physically involve yourself. You don't have to be violent. Speak up and say, "Hey,
Hmm.
come on." And
Yeah.
if you are in a place where you're allowed to be armed to protect yourself and your neighbors, by all means do so.
Yeah.
Because I don't know about anybody else, but I'm getting long in the tooth, and people get hands on with you. It just doesn't work so well anymore. The speed of motion is gone.
Train harder.
And I'll tell you what, just watching some of the stuff that goes on in the cities now and seeing some of the crazy in my small city, you don't want to be involved in that, but you can't leave people to their,
Yeah.
you can't leave people who who are vulnerable. You can't leave them alone, and you got to let them know you're there. And a good example is a woman who's in my neighborhood. We didn't see her much during the pandemic, but when we saw her, we'd pursue it and go have a chat with her. And she was fearful, but what she was most fearful of is that she would get sick and nobody would come to help her. And once she said that, I said, "That's just crazy." I said, "You can call me up and I'll across the street. I'll come help you out in a minute."
Yeah.
So people believe they're alone. Remind them they're not.
Right. Build your tribe.
That's it.
Build your G-force.
Oh, now you're back to Pineland. There you go.
Well, so we're about an hour in, and I don't want this to go 3 hours tonight. So I want to wrap up this discussion, and it's a segue to the next topic. With we've talked an awful lot about the sort of incompetence and or deliberate actions of our federal government and the various agencies, and we've talked about the plight of these poor refugees, quote unquote, air quotes. But I'd like to talk about the second derivative of this, and that is the Mexican cartels, and what's likely to occur at an even higher level in the context of this swarm of, pick it, 750 to 1 million initial refugees coming over the border. It's a free fire zone for the cartels. They're going to be making a lot more money. And what else is going to be coming across the border in the midst of all of the confusion and chaos of this wave of human refugees that we need to be concerned about? Because I think, and this is the other thing that colors my judgment on this entire issue of the border and immigration and everything else, and that is, I believe we're at war with Mexico. I really do. I think we are in a conflict with Mexico, and Mexico is not our friend. And you can subdivide that any way you want in terms of the Mexican government or the Mexican cartels or some combination of the two of them or some iteration of those two and foreign actors that are enabling them to do various things. But I think let's just call a spade a spade. I think we're at war with Mexico. Just as we're at war with Russia, where we're acting in that capacity in Ukraine to foment the continuation of a Slavic civil war, I think Mexico is playing a similar role as it relates to us in fomenting and enabling or not cracking down on the various business lines that make up the Mexican cartels. And I think they're profiting by it. I think that everybody in the Mexican government is corrupt and that they're profiting on it. And so until and unless we recognize that fact and we act in recognition of the fact that we are at war with Mexico, I don't think any of this stuff is going to change, guys. Any thoughts?
I'll say this. I think the problem, particularly with fentanyl and the cartels, we try and put it in the law enforcement basket and say,
Yeah.
okay, this is how we're going to deal with this. This is a law enforcement issue. And law enforcement uses the kingpin strategy, which is, they spend years going after somebody like Chapo and Guzman, and 10 years later they finally get the guy. Then a couple of years later he finally gets extradited, and then a couple of years later he's in Supermax. That's one guy. The day that Chapo got caught, his replacement showed up, and the whole machine just kept on going.
Well, in his case, it was his son.
Yeah,
right?
but what I'm saying is like the kingpin strategy is great to pursue legal cases in the court of law, but we don't have jurisdiction in Mexico, and that should move it out of the law enforcement arena. I mean, I'm not saying don't do the kingpin strategy. Let DEA and all the other people who do international law enforcement liaison kind of stuff, let them do their thing. But there are other elements of national power that we need to wield against the cartels, and maybe an obstinate Mexican government that is protecting them, just like we would if the cartels were Al Qaeda or ISIS, and say Syria's President Assad was supporting them or what have you. We need to use all elements of national power to achieve our objectives. And the first thing we need to do is decide what our objectives are. And then second is to get the right tool for the job. And I don't mean, the 82nd Airborne jumping into Guadalajara kind of thing. I mean, the last thing you want is the big conventional, blunt instrument in Mexico making enemies where, maybe you could find some people who are friendly and would,
we're not
help
good
you
at winning
out.
hearts and minds?
Yeah. Well,
we haven't perfected that yet. Shit.
yeah, I guess what I'm saying is we have tools to do these kind of things short of all out military intervention. And we seem hesitant to use these tools, use them appropriately, or even, muster the will to take on the mission. And I think that's what has to change.
Well, and go ahead, Ron.
No, I mean, Max is spot on. I mean, prior to 9/11, terrorism was a law enforcement issue. It was not a JSOC, a military, an agency, paramilitary third option, terror opto, that sort of thing. I mean,
Right.
it was totally law enforcement. It was the FBI, this and that. After 9/11, I mean, everything radically changed, and then changed even more with McChrystal's change in strategy in Iraq, and I mean, my God, the exhausting tempo of operations. Like 3-4 operations a night. Bang, hit a target. Quick. SSE exploitation, and next target, and then so on and so forth until daylight. And my God, it was, we took them out. And I'm not saying we need to start droning these people, but maybe look at the Israelis the way they
Why?
they
Why
took
not?
it. Well, hang
Let
on.
me make my point here, okay?
Sure.
Just parenthetically, and then please continue. But I want to make this parenthetical point. 9/11, we lost 3,000 people day of, okay?
Oh, yeah.
Plus all of the knock-on impacts from people's health problems and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
We're losing that a day to fentanyl.
Yeah, but we don't recognize it.
Why?
It's because we don't have the World Trade Center, pancaking down to the ground. We don't have people falling out of the upper stories, making, with horrific photos. And we don't have people walking through, ash-filled streets of New York, looking totally bonkers. We don't have, the wife
So
of the
it's a
Solicitor General texting her husband
Yeah.
on a flight that's about to impact into the Pentagon.
Right.
None of this is real. It's like onesies and twosies, but the aggregate total, yeah, it's huge. But there's nothing ginormous about it. But I mean, you brought up Assad, in Syria. I mean, the Israelis, like, hey, let's launch a few F-16s, F-35s, whatever, and let's go take out some Hamas sites, or
Right.
SAM sites or whatever, and let them know. I mean, we got to let Mexico know. I mean that, hey, we're not going to put up with this anymore, and we know where the cartels are headquartered. I mean, DEA's got the target folders. I mean, type of thing, and just start. Hey, the B-52 was off course. Sorry, we did a arc light all over. The pick a cartel's headquarters.
Right.
God, I'd pay dollars to see that shit.
So, yeah, you see, but
You are paying dollars, but you're not.
You're paying a lot of dollars, and we're losing a lot of people. So the numbers, I mean, the numbers on Americans dead from this are catastrophic. Nobody wants to connect the dots, Stan, is the answer, because there's no political imperative to connect the dots, because the incumbent government will look bad. Nobody wants in this incumbent government to transition from law enforcement to other methods, because law enforcement is what they're using to protect themselves internally. So the law enforcement arm of the government
That's right
is the
on.
Praetorian Guard, right? So I mean, back to your building a fur coat out of mouse pelts, right? That's what they're doing, right? They're building a fur coat, a full length fur coat out of mouse pelts. Here's a perfect example. I pull because I've been seeing these, and there's an acceleration in them to say, hey, we're doing this. This is Homeland Security. They got this guy. What's his name? Ivan. Doesn't matter. Cholo Ivan from Sinaloa. He was the security guy for the Sinaloa cartel. El Chapo's head of security. So they're bringing him in. Okay, so we got a 42-year-old Mexican guy. He's clearly a bad guy. Homeland Security investigations. Big numbers, 6,000 people in that group. This is what they do. They're building the mouse coat, right? But that's what they do. They do it pretty well, and they'll keep doing it because they've got a budget and they're justifying their existence. Is it necessarily the point of the spear to deal with these transnational organizations? Probably not. Will they say that it's not? No way, because they want to be the people who do this. We had this problem in 1939 and 1940 with the FBI wanting to take over international operations, counterintelligence. And you had people in DC who were smart enough to say, yeah, it's probably not a great idea. But the FBI fought aggressively. And you had a few guys, Donovan et al., who were asked by the president to figure out a way to circumvent the power grab that the FBI was doing at 39, 40, 41. And they were successful at boxing them into Latin America only, which, as we understand, you guys only do Latin America. We're in a similar position now, which is we have to reassess how we do all of this stuff. But the guys who are in law enforcement in DC are very powerful, and they're not going to give up their fiefdoms for anybody. So we're going to see a lot of these mouse coats, and they're going to keep pulling the pelts in.
Yeah, I need to circumvent this because I don't think we've got time to build fur
Mouse
coats
coats?
from mouse. Yeah, I don't think that fits the timeline that we're on, and
No.
so this is going to allow me to segue to what I really want to talk about this evening. And I think it was 10 days or so ago on Council for Future Conflict, I got sort of worked up and said, God damn it, then, I'm frustrated with this entire ball of wax that we've been talking about for an hour and 13 minutes now. And we've been talking about collectively now for months and basically over a year. I'm frustrated with it. I want to do something about it. And in no particular order, that speaks to the immigration issue, that speaks to the fentanyl issue. I'm just gobsmacked that we lose 100,000 people at plus a year to this, and nobody pays attention to it. And I'll come back to why I think that is in just a minute. But I want to find a vehicle that allows us to make these points on the broader stage in a way that they can't be ignored. And I made the flippant comment about, well, maybe what we need to do is create a tax-exempt organization that does for the fentanyl issue what Tunnels for Towers does for veterans or law enforcement officers or other organizations that are best in class in terms of messaging around an issue or a group of people who are otherwise overlooked by the community, and taking it and making it personal to people who may not been touched directly about it, but make them understand that they're one step away from being touched about this. And I believe that's where we are with fentanyl. Fentanyl has gone from being a drug addict's problem, right? Somebody who's a heroin addict who's gotten a hold of fentanyl, to now being a problem with U.S. teenagers in suburban areas who were at a party and got a hold of the wrong pill, took one and done. Okay? It's now migrated into suburbia to a degree that people are just beginning to understand. And I want us to be able to sort of capture that message and drive it home to people and wake them up, shake them out of that normalcy bias on this issue that's killing 100,000 plus Americans a year, that's being run out of China, run through Mexico with the cooperation, and I'm going to say this, with the cooperation of the Mexican government, because the abject sort of overlooking of what's going on here is, by my definition, cooperation. And you can't tell me that blood money isn't finding its way into the Mexican government in some way, shape, or form. Hell, I'm not so sure it's not finding its way into the DHS in one way, shape, or form at this particular
yeah.
point. Okay,
Yes.
so this sort of silly idea has sort of captured my imagination, and we're going to talk about this more as we go on with the Privy Council. But I'd like to get people's thoughts on this. Okay, people in the chat, people who hear this, people who see this, because I want to go ahead and start the process of creating an organization that is going to be the voice on fentanyl to this public, and frame fentanyl in the manner in which it needs to be framed, that it's not just a failure of law enforcement, although it is, but it's also a failure in foreign policy. It's a failure in terms of protecting the country against a clear and present danger. It's a failure to protect the country against the actions of foreign state actors right across the board.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll stop there for a minute. I'll keep going on, but I'll stop there for a minute and sort of take comments from you guys and comments from people in the chat if they're so inclined.
Billy, a guy named Billy Blogs comes up with a good point, which is it's weaponized heroin. So I don't think it's lost on the Chinese that we're vulnerable to this, and hence it's clear why the volume of the flow of the precursor chemicals and the narcotics are coming in. And you can imagine that the same people who are selling the precursors and chemicals are probably helping in the laundering of the dollars that are going into Mexico.
You think?
So, yeah, but again, you got to connect the dots, and you got to do it every day. And when people go, "Well, isn't it terrible? Did you hear about so and so's son?" You pipe up and you say, "Yeah, it's really terrible that we're not able to control our border. It's really terrible that we can't put a boot on the Chinese importation of illegal chemicals into Mexico. And it's really sad that those places don't burn down spontaneously. Isn't that terribly sad?" But you gotta be willing to have the conversation at the cocktail party. Otherwise, they'll go about their business.
I agree with that, but I think one of the goals of this organization is to do on this fentanyl issue what the Cancer Society does for cancer, what the Heart Association does for cardiac disease.
Mothers Against Drunk Driving.
And it's really interesting that you say that, because I had a conversation with a deputy prosecutor, as I mentioned, and I said, "Chris, tell me, how do we get our arms? Give me the law enforcement perspective as it relates to fentanyl." And he went through this stuff, and he said much of what we've said here, and that is people are focused on capturing the distributor in a certain area, but that guy's taken out, and two guys tried to fight, are going to fight to take his place in terms of the logistical aspects of this. And he said, really, and I said, we're going to have to partner with people to do this. He said, the organization you ought to talk to and maybe mirror part of this organization around is MAD. And the thing he said about MAD is that MAD has got volunteers in most jurisdictions that are watching what prosecutors do as it relates to sentencing recommendations in trials involving drunk drivers. So if there's a guy who's up as a third time lucky from a DUI perspective, they're actively involved at that point, amicus briefs, et cetera, to make sure that guy doesn't walk, or gal. I'm not trying to be sexist, but that person doesn't walk on a DUI. And there's a network of information that's watching at least the criminal court aspect of this, that you can leverage with the MAD folks, who are probably sympathetic to this notion of fentanyl being a killer drug in our society. And I was really sort of struck by that, because I thought it was a really good idea. But what it tells me is that this organization that I'm talking about, and I don't have a name for it yet, I'm open to suggestions. I wanted to call it the Sentinel Foundation, but that thing already exists, and it's basically It's people that are trying to stop children trafficking and one thing, and God love them, kudos to them, but I really wanted the name. But we'll figure it out. But I think mission one is to drive home to people this thing that's missing that Ron talked about, which is you may not see the, World Trade 1, World Trade 2, and World Trade 7 pancaking on your television every day, but the equivalent is happening around you each and every day. And it's not happening just to drug addicts laying in homeless shelters in San Francisco or LA. It's happening all across the country, and we've got the numbers to prove it. I think that's got to break through to people on the one hand. And I think that then has a lobbying component in terms of policy formation with respect to both state and federal components of how we respond to this. And lastly, and this is where I get excited about it, and that is I think it's also there to help. We started talking about governors banding together, okay? Governors that need to get together and have access to resources, personnel, material, money to do the things that we hope that they start to do in this sort of situation. I won't go to letters of marque, although that's a favorite of mine. But I think we have to be a resource that says to Governor Abbott, that says to the governors, to Kristi Noem and other governors, because there are MS-13 people in South Dakota as we speak.
Tell me about it.
Okay. And
I know.
they are trafficking this stuff everywhere throughout the country. Okay.
Yep.
To Governor Gianforte in Montana, who's strong on all this stuff, and I hope stays strong on this stuff. We've got to be an organization with enough heft to be able to be on their side so that they've got the courage to go out and do what they need to do in order to stop this. And I think the federal government will get dragged kicking and screaming to it when it becomes enough of a political message and enough people start asking the question. But I think it starts at the level below the federal government. In fact, we'll probably be at odds with the federal government in the initial sort of go around on this because they don't want to talk about it. Quite clearly, they don't want to talk about it. It's a law enforcement problem, and it only kills drug addicts. That's not true any longer.
No, it's not.
So you're going to hear more about this, whether you like it or not, on Privy Council. And if you don't like it, then tune us out. That's all I can tell you, because I'm really sort of
stands on a mission.
I really sort of have this bit in the teeth. And I'll tell you one thing you can do if you're interested in this, if you want to help us. I don't want money from you at this juncture because we don't have enough. We don't have the ability to take it from a tax deductible perspective. But what I do need you to do is, if you're amenable to this, I'd like you to think about whether or not you would write a letter that said, if such an organization existed, I would be willing to donate to it at some point in the future. Because the goal to get this up and operating is to submit that form to the IRS with a stack of letters that says we want this to happen, and make the case that but for your designation, this would be happening today. I've done this before.
You let me know when you're ready. There are a number of services that I can set up so that we have an actual, like, hey, go here, sign this, put down your name and email address.
Yeah,
and then,
exactly.
And then we'll have that all ready to go.
I would really, if there's a groundswell around this, and I knowing our viewers as I think I do, I think that there is a sizable percentage of them who probably would be on board on this. But we're going to keep going. I mean, I've got a couple of people who I think can write a 6 or 7 figure check to get this going. Yeah, Ron, go ahead.
Well, I just want to say, I think the other thing is for the folks, writing your letters to support Stan's, nonprofit with the IRS.
Well, I'd rather it be us,
but
not.
Well,
just
yeah,
Stan,
but also make the commitment to yourself that because one of the reasons MAD has been so successful is that it goes in all 50 states.
That's
and
right.
almost every, and you need to be the local advocate for this, and you need to fight. It's all wonderful. You guys are all in the chat. Yeah. You follow CFC 3 times a week. You follow us on Wednesdays. Wonderful, great. Applaud. But get off your ass, get off your computer, and go advocate. Go testify in front of your county commissioners. Go testify in front of your city councils, and go hold the state's attorney, the district attorney, whatever they're called. Hold them accountable. Go to public forums where you're allowed to speak and say, hey, how come you didn't prosecute so and so? How come you're allowing these people to do this? And and judges, confront judges saying, hey, how come you're doing these suspended sentences on these drug dealers and these people? They're guilty of this. You need to fight. You need to fight back. And so, hey, but what?
Anti-commies being a prick in the chat.
Well, that's because Mrs. Commies cut him off. I don't know.
I
I mean, he's
I
sleeping
know.
on the couch.
I know.
So
Anyhow, so and part of what the organization would be meant to do is I would love to do what Matt has done, or maybe piggyback on what Matt has done with some of the same people, and because they're already in this process in one aspect of it. But I'd like people to say I'm going to be the coordinator for whatever we call this thing for this 3-county area in pick your state, okay? And I'm going to help try to build an organization of people who do exactly what Ron's talking about. Go to Kiwanis meetings. I know that makes me even older than I thought I was.
at least he didn't say Elks.
Or yeah, go to the Elks or the Moose, or my favorite, the IOOF, the International Order of Oddfellows, which is amazing in its own right. But go out and talk to people and make the case, because Americans, I think once they know about something, I think they're prone to act. At least they used to be. But we've got to tell the story. It can't be buried in page 6 of the New York
We got to
Post.
do this all before 2025, Q1. Otherwise, it'll get lost in the violence of the revolution, Civil War, whatever. Sorry.
Mostly peaceful. I'm done.
Sorry, Stan. I know this is important to you.
But you know what, though? And I'm a little disappointed, Ron. And Max, maybe you too. I'm not sure. We'll see. Because it's not a revolution. It's a counter-revolution.
It is. I want to go back to, damn it. I want to, hey,
So
we got this wonderful, I mean, I keep seeing, on social media, these ignoramuses with hundreds of thousands of followers, saying, look at all these states. They have this much population, and they've got, whatever, and they've got all these senators. And here's California with the same amount of population, and they've only got 2 senators. Oh my God, how unfair everything is. It's like, and people are like, yeah, this is great. We got to do something about it. I'm going like, has anybody fucking read the Constitution or the Federalist Papers or, studied anything about, like,
Listen to Schoolhouse Rock.
No.
I mean,
They literally deliberately stopped teaching that in
Jesus.
schools around the mid 2000s.
Exactly. They don't teach it anymore.
God, it's, but these people that do this, I know they're not stupid, but they're getting a lot of people all fired up, and you go like, are you effing kidding me, people? I mean, I go to meetings around here and going, man, I don't know, South Dakota, we're kind of small, we don't have a big voice. We got a voice. Our voice is just as loud as everybody else's. We just need senators that know how to bellow.
And you're free to speak your piece.
Exactly.
And it's an important thing that you don't remain silent, because people are trying to be too damn polite. And Stan, the interesting attribute to this is a grassroots effort that's touching all states. We're losing hundreds of thousands of people, most of them young.
Yep.
It's a transnational threat, which makes it difficult for some people to understand it, right? Unless it touches them.
Well, yeah,
it's a hard thing to understand.
Jim, I can take a magic marker and a whiteboard, and I can explain this to people in 3 seconds. Okay, here's China. Here's the stuff. It goes to Mexico. They fabricate it. They smuggle it across the border along with all these 12.5 million illegal immigrants, about to be 15, and it's distributed across the country.
And they'll look you in the eye and say that's the government's responsibility. They're gonna have to do something.
But they're not. So there's a
I
failure.
agree.
But
They
we
don't
are the
understand the
government.
power of their voice.
And it is metastasized now. This past Halloween, there was fentanyl found in look-alike Halloween candy. Okay, didn't get a lot of coverage, but it's real. A lot of it was in California, and so it's just a matter of time. And this is payback. Let's call a spade a spade. People say, well, it's just drug cartels, and they're just doing what drug cartels do, right? No, it's not. This is payback for the humiliation of the Chinese state in the opium wars with the British. That's where this comes from. Okay, this is payback.
You really think that?
I know that. I know that for sure.
Okay. I mean, I believe, I agree with you. I'm just like, I'm sitting there trying to formulate an op-ed piece, and without, like going like everybody goes, yep, Ron's smoking crack again.
Ron, if you follow, and it's difficult to do, but there's enough in the way of English language Chinese media.
No,
you could find the reference in Chinese media that this is that.
You got to remember, I'm dealing with local editors and publishers who are like, well, what does that have to do with the price of cattle at the local, feedlot, sale barn type of thing? So I get it. I mean, I'm sorry. I'll think quietly to myself.
Actually, you know what you should do is write that and put it in And magazine. You get Fattest to publish it for you.
Oh,
So
yeah, I can do that.
Put it in and put it in the local paper, and tell your local editor it's going to be in And magazine. Then he'll really know you're certifiable.
So that's fine. Yeah,
He already does.
I want to ask people in the chat. I'd like a flow of consciousness on this if you're interested, and the venue I'd like you to do it is I'd like you to DM the Privy Council at on Twitter at MT Privy Council, and I'd like that to be a place where you can dump ideas on this issue. And if you have thoughts, or you want to be involved, you want to volunteer, or you want to tell me to go pound sand, that's okay too. But I'd like to start a dialogue around this, because I'm going to try to do this. And I'd like to harness some of the energy that is in this audience to help us formulate this, to create a mission statement. Because in my mind, this becomes something that can be powerful and useful in the context of focusing attention and energy on this issue. Mm-hmm. And by extension, what it does is it highlights, because of the state involvement at both the Mexican and the Chinese level, it highlights for public consumption that this is not just a law enforcement issue. This is a interstate aggression being played out on the American people that nobody wants to talk about. And I think that point has got to punch through and break the normalcy bias that says, oh, Mexico's always been Mexico.
It's hard.
And whatever. But I think the fact that Mexico is responsible for responsible, not just complicit, but responsible, and benefiting from the provision of the leading cause of death amongst the prime population cohort in the United States, 18 to 45. Okay. That is an attack on the American way of life. That's all it is. It's meant to do that. It's meant to demoralize and depopulate and destroy and create the same sort of demographic issues that the Chinese are facing. And if you don't believe that, you're not paying attention. But we'll make the case in intervening weeks around this, that this is no different than going out and poisoning the water well of your neighbor's cattle ranch to kill them. It's no different.
Dan, I think I think this message here, this topic, the fentanyl crisis, is something that transcends the political boundaries. And unfortunately, the narrative in the United States has been hijacked by a really small percentage of the population, and it's all focused on trans issues, equity, LGBTQ, blah blah, white supremacy is everywhere. This false narrative that's being generated to divide the country. And but the country, I think most people are tired of hearing that narrative. And this
Fentanyl
is
doesn't
something
care.
I think can replace that false narrative. It's like, hey, we have a fentanyl problem and we've got to come together here and solve this. And this is going to happen at the grassroots level. There is enough work for everyone at every level in this country, left or right. There's enough work to do to tackle this job, and we need your help. I think that's the message that you should push forward, and you should push that into the top of the narrative and get rid of this superfluous crap. I mean, we've got, America's got real work to do here with this fentanyl problem. And you're right, it's not just Mexican cartels, it's unrestricted warfare. It's unconventional unrestricted warfare from a transnational adversary. So if we just lay down and do nothing, it's just going to get worse.
It's no different than if I put gas cylinders in an aircraft, poison gas cylinders, and flew over the population and released poison gas. It's no different than that. It is the equivalent act in that context. It is, and there's no blood or sauce that you could paint on your lentils, like Passover, that you're not going to get hit by this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just don't. I think you got to make people understand that people talk about that guy, the Russian guy that drank the polonium 210 tea that Putin wanted to take out, and that was horrific. It was extra national terrorism, blah 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 blah. Or the guy and his daughter who got hit with the Novichok umbrella and it didn't quite kill him, but it paralyzed him in one thing and another. That was dramatic and whatever. This is out of sight. It's out of mind, but it's 100,000 times worse than either of those incidents. Okay. And you got to make people see what's going on this issue first, and then formulate a response.
Yep.
There's a lot of frustration to me on this, but I think it's a gateway, A, to make people aware, B, to foment action, and C, to really get after the problem that really threatens the sovereignty of the United States. And this is an issue that cross-cuts everybody. Most of you know where I stand on transgender and all the rest of this sort of stuff. I feel for those people. I think they're ill. I think they need help. But this problem is agnostic as it relates to your sexual orientation.
Fentanyl doesn't care.
Doesn't care.
Yeah.
Doesn't care. It doesn't care. Okay. So maybe it's something that we can sort of get people around a table and do something on a constructive basis that solves a big issue and provide.
And then we can put the transgenders in the wood chipper. Just sorry.
Well, you know what?
Sorry.
No. I understand that, and I understand the reason to say that, and I'm going to color that with one last comment before we sign off here, and that is the Andrew Bailey, who's the Attorney General of the state of Missouri, has come out and said that in the state of Missouri, under legislation that's recently been passed, there will be no gender assignment surgeries, reassignment surgeries, no hormone treatment for anybody who thinks they might be on the other team until they've undergone a year's worth of psychological therapy, which the state is willing to contribute money to pay for, until they've tried to solve the underlying whatever gender dysphoria creating trauma may be in their lives. Which in my mind is one of the most constructive things I've heard about this whole situation. Okay.
Absolutely.
And so what happens immediately thereafter? The city council of Kansas City, Missouri comes out and says, we can't allow that. We're going to create Kansas City as a sanctuary city for LGBTQ people. And this is not someplace in California. This is not someplace, this
But
is
it's
in
a city. Every city is a blue island
I
wherever it's
understand it.
at.
It's Kansas City, Missouri, of all places. And I just, so if we can get people to look past that stuff and really start to focus on what do we have to do to kill the people who are killing us, bluntly said. Okay?
Well,
Maybe that's a start. Maybe that's a
well,
start.
it's hard. I mean, even here in South Dakota, I mean, I heard a local politician talk about how foreign ownership of ranch land and farmland, agricultural land, was not a bad thing. It's okay. And everybody and the rest of us in the group are all looking at him like, dude, you realize you got a dick growing out of your forehead, right? But this guy is so well, he's not very smart. And yeah, I'm probably gonna have to run against him for county commissioner in a couple of years. So we'll see. But anyways,
Well,
so
when it's time, let us know.
I will.
All
By
right.
that time we'll
So
all be
so
in the wood chipper
that's
anyways.
I sort of want to draw a line under this because I'd like to get us back to a 90-minute ish format on this show.
That's
And
good.
also as part of that, stay tuned because there's going to be some changes both in schedule and some other aspects. We may go to every other week, and the reason for doing that is to take this 90 minutes and make it more dense from a content perspective, with
Mhm.
more prep at the front end. Some of you know I've been working on this this show that we're going to do on quantum computing and AI, and I want that to be sort of an example as to what we think we can do, and it's going to be, I think, great. And it's taken a lot longer because of the work that's going into it. But I think we may move to an every other week sort of scenario. And I also want to create a better mechanism for viewer participation. Watcher's done a good job of creating sort of a workaround on that, but it's a little too clunky, and I don't think we've gotten the participation. But I think everybody enjoys it. To be brutally honest, I'm thinking about going strictly to Twitter on the heels of what Tucker's going to do, and maybe using Twitter Space as a way to sort of factor that sort of viewer participation thing in. But that's all work in progress. So watch this space, and we'll be having some updates on that as we move along. But I really, I think this can be a venue where we communicate really important information to people who need to hear it, and I'm committed to trying to do that in a way that augments our discussion around this effort in fentanyl and this effort in terms of protecting our national sovereignty and protecting our rights. Because I do think that we're coming to Q1 2025, and I'd like this to be a place that's a little bit of a beacon for what the hell you're going to do when that happens. Because I think it's coming. So that's my crazy Alex Jones rant for this evening. And
I'm good. I got the spare bedroom all ready for Max and his family, so we're good.
Just remember that Alex Jones has proven to be right on most issues. So
I know. That's scary.
It's terrifying.
Yeah. So
I don't know what you're talking about.
exactly. All right. Thanks everybody, and we'll see you. Probably next week for a show, and then stay tuned in terms of what we're going to do from a schedule shift. Thanks everybody. Have a great evening. Take care.